When you look at the show, there are times when we're biting our lips from laughing. I'm trying not to laugh. It was a perfect time for a show like Lost in Space.
What happens when the bright lights of 1960s science fiction fame fade, leaving only whispers and half-truths about what really occurred behind the scenes? For decades, fans of the groundbreaking series Lost in Space have speculated about the tensions, relationships, and untold stories from one of television's most iconic space adventures. How much of what we think we know about the Robinson family's real-life dynamics is accurate? What secrets remained locked away in the memories of its young stars? Stay with me as we dive into what really happened on the Lost in Space set, and why Marta Kristen's recent revelations still matter more than 50 years after the Jupiter 2 first launched into America's living rooms. In recent interviews marking her 80th birthday, Marta Kristen, forever known to millions as the spirited Judy Robinson, has finally broken her decades-long silence about the complex reality behind the cheerful family dynamics portrayed on screen. Her revelations come at a moment when classic television is experiencing unprecedented resurrection through streaming platforms, introducing Lost in Space to entirely new generations of viewers. These aren't just nostalgic reminiscences, they're clarifications of long-standing rumors that have circulated among fans since the show's cancellation in 1968. What makes Kristen's perspective particularly valuable is its timing. As one of the last surviving principal cast members of the original series, her recollections provide crucial context for understanding not just Lost in Space, but the broader landscape of 1960s television production. The working conditions, gender dynamics, and network pressures she describes paint a picture far more complicated than the polished science fiction adventure that captivated millions of viewers every Wednesday night. For younger viewers discovering the show through endless streaming options, Kristen's stories bridge the gap between the charmingly retro special effects and the very real humans who brought the Robinson family to life. Her candor about everything from salary disparities to on-set hierarchies offers a rare glimpse into an era when television actors, particularly women, had little agency or protection in an industry still defining its boundaries. What began as anniversary reflections has evolved into something far more significant, a first-hand account of television history from someone who lived it from the inside, watching as a cultural phenomenon took shape around her while she navigated the complex realities of young womanhood in Hollywood's golden age. Long before she would don the silver spacesuit of Judy Robinson, Marta Kristen's story began far from Hollywood's bright lights. Born Birgit Annelise Rusanen in Oslo, Norway, on February 26, 1945, her earliest years were shaped by post-war Europe's turbulence and uncertainty. Orphaned as an infant, she was adopted by an American couple who brought her to the United States and renamed her Marta. This profound transition from European war orphan to American child would be just the first of many transformations in a life that seemed destined for extraordinary paths. By her early teens, Marta's striking Nordic features and natural presence before cameras had drawn the attention of modeling scouts. Small roles followed, including an appearance in Beach Blanket Bingo and guest spots on television shows like Alfred Hitchcock Presents. But in an industry flooded with young blonde actresses, Kristen worked diligently to distinguish herself through her craft rather than just her appearance. She studied acting seriously, approaching even small roles with a depth that made directors take notice. The Hollywood landscape Kristen entered in the early 1960s operated on deeply entrenched systems of power. Young actresses were expected to be simultaneously innocent and alluring, professional and pliable. Studios still functioned under contract systems that controlled everything from an actor's weight to their dating life. For women especially, navigating this terrain required constant vigilance and compromise. When Irwin Allen, already known as a prolific producer of adventure films, began casting for his ambitious new science fiction series in 1965, Kristen was 20 years old enough to bring experience to the role, yet young enough to credibly play a teenager. The concept appealed to her immediately, a family-centered space adventure that would showcase her as an intelligent young woman rather than merely decorative set dressing. After years of one-dimensional roles, Judy Robinson represented something different, a character with potential to grow alongside Kristen herself. What neither Kristen nor anyone else involved could have possibly anticipated was how this show would not only define careers, but become a cultural touchstone that would endure for generations. The spaceship was about to launch, carrying not just the fictional Robinson family, but the real lives and careers of its cast into uncharted territory. When Lost in Space premiered on CBS on September 15, 1965, it entered a television landscape hungry for escapism. With the space race at full throttle and Cold War tensions simmering, American audiences embraced the Robinson family's interstellar adventures with enthusiasm. The show's premiere was a ratings triumph, establishing it immediately as a formidable competitor, even against established hits. For Marta Kristen, the show's success brought immediate life-altering recognition. At just 20 years old, she suddenly couldn't walk through a department store without being swarmed by autograph seekers. Fan mail arrived by the bagful. Children pointed and whispered when she dined in restaurants. The transition from working actress to television star happened virtually overnight, bringing opportunities and challenges in equal measure. The first season of Lost in Space showcased a more serious, adventure-oriented tone that allowed Kristen's Judy Robinson to demonstrate competence, intelligence, and resourcefulness. As the elder Robinson daughter, Judy was portrayed as a biochemist, a surprisingly progressive choice for 1960s television, where women characters were rarely granted scientific credentials. Kristen embraced these dimensions of her character, bringing nuance to scenes where Judy applied her knowledge to solve problems threatening the family's survival. Behind the scenes, the cast quickly formed bonds that would endure for decades. June Lockhart, who played Maureen Robinson, took a maternal interest in Kristen's well-being and career development. Guy Williams, the dashingly handsome star who portrayed Professor John Robinson, treated Kristen with the protective attention of a real father. These relationships provided stability during the grueling production schedule that dominated their lives. What viewers couldn't see was the physical toll the production took on its actors. Filming in the notorious California desert heat while wearing spacesuits led to frequent cases of heat exhaustion. The Jupiter 2 set, though impressive on screen, was cramped and uncomfortable, with actors standing for hours under hot lights. Special effects sequences involving spacewalks required painful harness work that often left bruises. Yet through it all, Kristen approached her work with professionalism beyond her years, earning respect from crew members twice her age. The first season's success seemed to promise a long, stable run for the series and secure futures for all involved. But as with many aspects of show business, the reality proved far more complicated than the fantasy projected on America's television screens. By the second season, subtle but significant changes began reshaping Lost in Space, changes that would profoundly impact Kristen's role and the show's trajectory. Network executives, noting the popularity of the comically villainous Dr. Smith, played with scene-stealing relish by Jonathan Harris, and the robot, pushed for a tonal shift toward more comedic, outlandish storytelling. This pivot would dramatically alter the show's dynamic and the importance of different characters within it. Here's where it gets complicated, Kristen has recently acknowledged. As the show moved away from serious science fiction adventure and toward comedy, the women characters, particularly Judy, were increasingly sidelined. Episodes that once might have featured Judy using her scientific knowledge to save the day now gave those problem-solving moments to Dr. Smith, Will, and the robot. The production records confirm this shift. In the first season, Kristen appeared prominently in nearly every episode. By the third season, there were entire episodes where she had only a handful of lines. This professional frustration was compounded by the industry's gender disparities. Despite being one of the show's stars, Kristen earned significantly less than her male counterparts, even those with less screen time. When she professionally raised questions about her character's diminished role, she was reminded, as many actresses of the era were, that she should be grateful for the opportunity. This period coincided with major personal transitions for Kristen. In 1969, she married Terry Treadwell and soon after gave birth to her daughter Laura. Balancing new motherhood with the demands of a television series created tensions that weren't always understood by producers used to actors prioritizing work above all else. The exhausting schedule, often 16-hour days under hot lights or in difficult location shoots, took a physical and emotional toll that went largely unacknowledged. Meanwhile, behind-the-scenes dynamics grew increasingly complex. Jonathan Harris, through sheer force of personality and undeniable talent, had effectively repositioned himself from supporting player to the show's central attraction. His masterful scene-stealing and constant script revisions, often done without official approval, created a competitive atmosphere among the cast. For a young actress like Kristen, navigating these professional politics required diplomacy and resilience beyond her years. The power dynamics on set reflected the broader entertainment industry of the 1960s. The male stars could object to storylines or advocate for better material without being labeled difficult. The women, by contrast, were expected to accept whatever material they were given with grateful smiles. This fundamental inequity created frustrations that couldn't be openly expressed without risking professional consequences. What television viewers never saw were the physical and emotional demands placed on the cast of Lost in Space. The iconic silver spacesuits that looked so futuristic on screen were, in reality, poorly ventilated torture devices under the hot lights. Kristen has recently revealed that actors would frequently emerge from scenes with their undergarments completely soaked through with sweat, only to be hurried back into the uncomfortable costumes after brief breaks. The production's special effects, groundbreaking for television at the time, created their own hazards. The wires used for flying scenes left bruises that makeup artists would cover before close-ups. Smoke effects used for spacecraft launches caused respiratory irritation. The Jupiter 2 set, while impressive on camera, was cramped and uncomfortable, with sharp-edged control panels that regularly left actors with cuts and bruises. Financial realities created another layer of tension largely invisible to audiences. Despite the show's massive popularity, it generated millions in merchandising alone. The cast received no residual payments for reruns or percentage of product licensing. This was standard practice at the time. But the contrast between the main show's immense profitability and the cast's modest compensation became increasingly difficult to ignore, especially as the series found new life in syndication. Court records and production documents from the period reveal the stark disparities in compensation. Guy Williams, as the ostensible star, earned roughly 3 times what Kristen was paid per episode, while Jonathan Harris, initially contracted as a supporting player, successfully negotiated raises that eventually exceeded even Williams' salary. When Kristen professionally inquired about compensation adjustments reflecting her character's popularity, she was reminded that attractive young actresses were replaceable, a common threat used to discourage women from advocacy. Perhaps most challenging were the industry's unspoken rules about personal conduct. Female cast members were expected to maintain specific weights, appearances, and public personas. Studio publicists carefully monitored their public lives, and dating the wrong person could result in professional consequences. For Kristen, navigating romance under this scrutiny created pressures that the male cast members simply didn't face. These behind-the-scenes stressors coincided with significant changes in Kristen's personal life, including her marriage and the birth of her daughter. The studio's limited accommodation for her new maternal responsibilities reflected the era's expectations that women would somehow manage family obligations without allowing them to impact professional commitments in any visible way. 60 years to the day after Lost in Space first beamed into American living rooms, Marta Kristen sits before an audience at the Hollywood Science Fiction Museum's anniversary celebration. At 80, her Nordic beauty remains striking, though now framed by elegant silver hair. The standing room only crowd hangs on her every word as she shares reflections that are by turns poignant, humorous, and surprisingly candid. For decades, she explains, I felt an obligation to protect the show's legacy by focusing only on positive memories. But as one of the few surviving primary cast members, I've come to believe there's more value in honesty. Young actors deserve to understand the real history of our industry, not just the polished mythology. This new candor has emerged gradually over recent years, accelerating as Kristen reached her 8th decade. In a series of interviews beginning in late 2024, she began addressing long-rumored tensions on the set, particularly the complex dynamics that developed as the show shifted focus toward Dr. Smith, Will Robinson, and the robot, often at the expense of other characters, including her own Judy Robinson. What makes her perspective particularly valuable is her balanced approach. While acknowledging frustrations about diminished screen time and the gender disparities common to 1960s television, Kristen also speaks with genuine affection about her castmates. She describes Jonathan Harris not as a villain who stole scenes, but as a consummate professional from vaudeville traditions who simply understood what audiences responded to. This nuanced view has helped fans develop a more sophisticated understanding of how television actually functioned during this pivotal era. Her revelations have coincided with a broader cultural reassessment of classic television, particularly regarding gender representation and workplace conditions. Younger viewers discovering Lost in Space through streaming services often express surprise at how Judy Robinson, introduced as a biochemist, gradually transformed into a character whose primary function was expressing fear or concern, while male characters solve problems. Kristen's testimony provides crucial context for understanding this evolution as a product of network decisions rather than creative necessity. Perhaps most significantly, Kristen has finally addressed the long-rumored tensions between Guy Williams and Jonathan Harris, confirming that while professional frustrations existed as the show's focus shifted, the oft-repeated stories of bitter animosity have been greatly exaggerated over decades of fan speculation. Her first-hand clarification has helped correct a narrative that had unfairly colored perceptions of both actors' legacies. These revelations haven't diminished fan enthusiasm for Lost in Space. Quite the opposite. By humanizing the production process and the people behind beloved characters, Kristen has deepened appreciation for what the cast achieved under challenging circumstances. The show's enduring popularity across generations stands as testimony to their collective talent and professionalism. What often gets lost in discussions of Lost in Space is the remarkable personal journey of Marta Kristen herself. From war orphan to television icon, represents a transformation few could navigate with such grace. Throughout her life, Kristen has demonstrated a resilience that mirrors the best qualities of Judy Robinson. After Lost in Space concluded in 1968, Kristen faced the challenge that confronts many actors closely associated with iconic roles: typecasting. Despite her evident talent, casting directors struggled to see beyond Judy Robinson. Rather than becoming bitter about these limitations, Kristen approached this phase with characteristic practicality. She focused on raising her daughter while selectively taking roles that interested her, regardless of their size or prominence. Friends and colleagues from this period describe Kristen's remarkable groundedness. Unlike many former child stars, she maintained perspective about fame's fleeting nature. She invested both financially and emotionally in sustainable life choices rather than chasing continued celebrity. This wisdom, unusual in Hollywood then as now, allowed her to build a fulfilling life outside the spotlight, while many peers struggled with the transition. Particularly noteworthy was Kristen's dedication to environmental causes long before such advocacy became fashionable in Hollywood. Inspired partly by Lost in Space's themes of planetary stewardship, she became involved with early conservation movements in the 1970s. This commitment has remained constant throughout her life, with Kristen lending her name and time to numerous environmental initiatives over the decades. Her approach to motherhood also defied Hollywood conventions. Rather than treating her daughter as an accessory to be displayed at convenient moments, Kristen built her professional choices around her family's needs. When offered roles that would require extended time away, she often declined, prioritizing stability over potential career advancement. This principled stance wasn't always understood in industry circles, but it reflected a value system that has served her well in the long term. Perhaps most remarkable has been Kristen's relationship with Lost in Space itself. Unlike some actors who grow resentful of being associated with a single role, She has embraced Judy Robinson as an important part of her legacy. At conventions and fan events, she engages genuinely with multiple generations of viewers, listening to their stories about how the show affected them with sincere interest. This generosity of spirit stands in marked contrast to the bitterness that sometimes characterizes actors' relationships with their most famous roles. Throughout life's inevitable challenges, including her divorce from Terry Treadwell and later health concerns, Kristen has demonstrated the same resourcefulness that characterized Judy Robinson's best moments. Friends describe her as someone who faces difficulties directly, without melodrama or self-pity, a quality that has earned her deep respect among those who know her personally. As 2025 unfolds, Lost in Space occupies a unique position in television history. The original series, despite its sometimes dated special effects, continues attracting new viewers through streaming platforms. The Netflix reboot that began in 2018 introduced the Robinson family concept to yet another generation. Throughout these evolutions, Marta Kristen has remained an eloquent ambassador for the franchise's original incarnation. Kristen's recent candor has inspired renewed scholarly interest in Lost in Space as a cultural artifact. Media historians have begun examining the show's production documentation, comparing initial character descriptions with how roles actually evolved over 3 seasons. This research substantiates Kristen's recollections about how network decisions gradually diminished female characters' agency in favor of comedic interactions between Dr. Smith, Will Robinson, and the robot. Fan communities have responded to Kristen's revelations with overwhelming support. Rather than rejecting more complicated truths about a beloved series, enthusiasts have embraced the opportunity to understand the human realities behind the science fiction fantasy. Convention attendance has actually increased following Kristen's more candid interviews, suggesting that authentic connection resonates more powerfully than polished mythology. For the entertainment industry itself, Kristen's willingness to discuss the gender disparities and power dynamics of 1960s television has contributed to important conversations about how far Hollywood has and hasn't progressed. Young actresses have specifically cited her example when advocating for more equitable treatment and creative input. This influence represents a meaningful extension of Kristen's legacy beyond her performance work. Professionally, Kristen maintains a selective but active relationship with acting. She chooses projects based on personal interest rather than career calculation, often favoring roles that allow her to work with emerging filmmakers. This approach has led to several critically acclaimed performances in independent productions, demonstrating that her talent remains vibrant in her 8th decade. The most significant recent development came in April 2025, when the Paley Center announced a comprehensive Lost in Space archive project, with Kristen serving as honorary chair. This initiative will preserve not just episodes, but production materials, correspondence, and new interviews with surviving cast and crew. Kristen's involvement ensures that women's experiences in 1960s television production will be documented with the same attention typically given to male creative figures. As one of the last surviving primary cast members, Kristen has embraced her role as the show's memory keeper with characteristic thoughtfulness. Her commitment to honest reflection rather than simple nostalgia has enhanced rather than diminished the series' legacy. By acknowledging both the magic created on screen and the very human challenges behind it, she has deepened appreciation for what Lost in Space accomplished. The story of Marta Kristen and Lost in Space ultimately transcends simple entertainment history. It speaks to broader themes of resilience, integrity, and the courage to reassess the past with honesty rather than defensive nostalgia. In an industry often criticized for superficiality, Kristen's journey represents substance and authentic growth. For women in Hollywood, Kristen's willingness to finally speak about the gender disparities she experienced provides crucial historical context for ongoing equality struggles. By documenting how structural decisions gradually diminished Judy Robinson from scientist to screamer, she illustrates patterns that continue affecting female characters and actresses today. This perspective doesn't diminish enjoyment of the original series, but rather enriches understanding of the conditions under which it was created. For actors of all genders, Kristen's balanced relationship with fame offers a masterclass in professional longevity. Her ability to value her iconic role without being limited by it, to appreciate fan enthusiasm without becoming dependent on external validation, demonstrates emotional wisdom that has eluded many with similar early success. This example seems particularly relevant in an era of social media, where boundaries between public personas and private selves grow increasingly blurred. Perhaps most importantly, Kristen's evolution from protecting a polished mythology to embracing complicated truths reflects broader cultural shifts in how we engage with our collective past. Neither uncritically nostalgic nor cynically dismissive, her approach makes space for genuine appreciation alongside honest acknowledgement of problematic elements. This balanced perspective creates room for multiple generations to engage meaningfully with shared cultural touchstones despite evolving social standards. In the end, what remains most remarkable about Marta Kristen isn't that she portrayed Judy Robinson, but how she has spent the decades since, building a life of purpose, maintaining her artistic integrity, and eventually finding the courage to speak her truth with kindness rather than bitterness. In doing so, she's added dimensions to Lost in Space that make it more rather than less significant to contemporary audiences. The lost young woman in a silver spacesuit has found her voice, and in doing so, helped us better understand not just a beloved television series, but the complex interplay of art, commerce, and human experience that creates our shared cultural heritage. What begins as science fiction sometimes reveals deeper truths about our very human reality. Through 6 decades, a silver spacesuit, and the courage to finally speak her truth, Marta Kristen has given us not just entertainment, but a window into television history as it was actually lived, with all its contradictions, challenges, and unexpected joys. If you've appreciated this deeper look into the real story behind Lost in Space, please consider subscribing to Golden Age Classics for more explorations of the fascinating truths behind your favorite films and television series. Hit the like button if you'd like to see more conversations with the actors who shaped our cultural landscape, and share this video with fellow fans who've wondered about what really happened when the cameras stopped rolling. Until next time, keep looking at the stars and the very human stories behind them.